Things are escalating in the Middle East, and fast. What started as a targeted strike has now exploded, pulling in global powers and putting the world's economy on a knife's edge. After a major U.S.-Israeli operation, Iran has hit back hard, and now the whole region is on the brink of something much, much bigger. Okay, let's get into it and try to make sense of what is going on.
The weapons that are really defining this conflict aren't what you might think. We're not talking about tanks or ground troops. We're talking about drones and missiles. They're small, they're fast, and they are incredibly hard to stop. And that's what makes them so central to this crisis. They can hit incredibly valuable targets from hundreds of miles away, and they can sometimes overwhelm even the best defense systems out there.
And this quote right here is absolutely key to understanding how Iran is framing this. From their perspective, these attacks didn't come out of nowhere. They've been very clear that this was, in their words, an act of retaliation. They're saying, you hit us first, and this is our response. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the spark that lit this fire. Then we'll dig into the specific targets, the US and Israel. After that, we'll see how this whole thing is starting to spiral outwards, who the shadow players are, and finally, the big question, what on earth happens next?
So how did we even get to this point? Let's rewind the clock just a little bit to the one event that really kicked off this huge wave of attacks.
Everything changed on February 28th, 2026. That's when a joint U.S.-Israeli missile operation hit several targets deep inside Iran. And the goal, at least according to the White House, was crystal clear. They said the strikes were meant to trigger regime change and to put a stop to Iran's nuclear program. In Iran's government, well, they didn't waste any time. The response was almost immediate, and it was huge. They unleashed a massive barrage of missiles and drones right across the Persian Gulf, aiming for countries across the region that have American military bases on their soil. So let's talk about where those missiles and drones were headed, because this wasn't just a random volley. It was a very strategic set of attacks, and they were laser-focused on two main adversaries, the United States and Israel. So why these specific targets? Let's put them side by side. On one hand, you've got the U.S. Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. Now, this isn't just some random base. It's the absolute nerve center for all U.S. naval operations in the Gulf. It's their job to keep 3 critical shipping lanes open. On the other side, you've got Navatim Air Base in Israel. This is a massive hub for Israeli air power, and it's where they keep some of their best jets. Iran went after it with their Khaybar-Shikhan missiles, basically sending a message that they can hit sensitive military sites deep inside Israel. And that's really the whole point. Hitting Nevatim, it wasn't just about blowing things up. It was a message, a very powerful one. By going after the base that holds Israel's top-of-the-line F-35 fighter jets, Iran was basically showing off the reach and the accuracy of its missile arsenal. And the attack on Bahrain has just been relentless. I mean, look at this timeline. You can see a clear pattern. It kicks off on February 28th with a direct hit on the U.S. Naval Headquarters. A few days later, a port and an oil tanker get hit. Then a refinery, and after that, a fuel depot. This wasn't random at all. It was a sustained campaign hitting both military and crucial economic targets.
And the cost just in Bahrain has been absolutely staggering. I mean, beyond the military damage, there's a real human cost here. We're talking 2 civilians killed, more than 50 injured, and 2 U.S. Department of Defense employees wounded. Vital infrastructure, like a desalination plant, got damaged. It got so bad that the state oil company had to declare force majeure. That's a legal term for when you just can't fulfill your contracts because of a disaster. The national airline even had to move its entire fleet. By March 12th, Bahrain reported that it had intercepted almost 300 drones and missiles. Just think about that scale.
Okay, so this is where the story gets much bigger, because this is no longer just a contained regional conflict. The fallout is starting to spill over, and the ripple effects are now being felt all around the world. Let's start with a number that should make everyone sit up and pay attention, 20%. That's how much of the entire world's oil consumption passes through one narrow waterway, the Strait of Hormuz. And right now, Iran has effectively shut it down, cutting off one of the main arteries for the world's energy supply. And the impact of that? It was immediate. It was drastic. According to the UN, ship traffic through the Strait of Hormuz dropped by a jaw-dropping 97%. The world's most important oil choke point has basically gone silent. The instability is spreading far beyond the region, too. While all eyes were on the Persian Gulf, North Korea suddenly fired 10 ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan. And analysts are saying this is probably not a coincidence. It's more likely a strategic move to test defenses, while their main adversary, the US, is seriously distracted elsewhere. And if one closed waterway wasn't bad enough, now a second one is under threat. Citing the strikes on Iran, the Houthi movement in Yemen has announced that they are going to start attacking commercial ships in the Red Sea again. This puts the whole Suez Canal route at risk, which could just multiply the economic chaos we're already seeing.
But this conflict isn't just about the countries doing the shooting. There are some very powerful nations moving pieces on the chessboard from the shadows, and they are shaping this war without ever firing a shot.
Which brings us to a really critical question. Is Iran actually fighting this war all by itself? Well, according to intelligence reports, the answer is a clear no. So the help Iran is getting isn't direct, but it is absolutely crucial. Reports suggest Russia is feeding Iran live intelligence on U.S. troop and ship movements. At the same time, China is apparently supplying things like spare missile parts and advanced navigation tech. And then, on the diplomatic front, both of them are providing cover at the UN by refusing to vote for a resolution that would condemn Iran's attacks. And to really understand why the UN is so divided, you have to look at the stated goals here. This is a quote from President Trump on the very day this whole thing started. He was explicit. The goal of the US-Israeli strikes was to topple the Iranian government. And then, here's the direct counterargument from Russia's ambassador at the UN. He argued that the resolution was one-sided because it completely ignored that initial US-Israeli attack. And this fundamental disagreement over who started it, that's exactly why the Security Council is completely paralyzed. So all of this brings us to the final and most important question: where do we go from here? And honestly, the stakes for the entire world could not possibly be higher. Let's just quickly run through the devastating cost of all this. The human toll is staggering. Reports of over 1,300 civilians killed in Iran, on top of the casualties in Bahrain. Economically, about a fifth of the world's oil is now at risk, and shipping routes are in chaos. Infrastructure all across the region has been smashed. And diplomatically, the UN is gridlocked, which just increases the risk of this whole thing spiraling into a much bigger war. And so we end right back where we started, on the brink. You have global powers picking sides, you have critical economic lifelines being severed,